everyone, I'm MaryAnn. I'm a visual artist and voice coach from Singapore, currently in Singapore, and welcome to another installment of my weekly vlog series, Live Your Dream. So this is where I share what I'm learning in my journey so far as an artist, as a voice coach, as someone who is all about pursuing my dreams and making them come true, and ultimately creating a worthy and meaningful purpose for myself. And I'm recording this series to share my learnings in this journey in the hopes that it could inspire you and motivate you and encourage you as you go on your journey of pursuing your dreams and creating a worthy and meaningful purpose for yourself, because this journey is like seriously the toughest journey that we can ever take, because we are trying to figure out how to forge our own path, trying to walk our own way and not subscribe to what everybody else seems to say that life is supposed to be about, and finding our own answers as we move forward in our very own unique journey and expressing ourselves in a way that only we can express ourselves, and ultimately living the best life that only we can live. So if you have questions about this, feel free to ask them in the comments, or you can also directly message me through any one of my social media links, which are in the write-ups attached to these videos. So this past few weeks I have been struggling with my 100-day illustration challenge that I have set for myself as a way of breaking through some of the limits that I have around my creative process and working as a working artist. And so it has been challenging because, first of all, I thought that each of these illustrations would probably only take like 2 hours, but they have been taking me at least like 5 hours on average. So if you do the math, that's pretty much like I've been in the studio most of my waking hours. And when I have other commitments, because I'm quite involved with the coaching and personal development community here in Singapore, so when I have other commitments there, then I'm off there doing something else, and then I come back and go back into the studio again. And so it's just been non-stop for almost 2 months now. And and I reached a point this past week where I was like getting so restless. I was getting really almost resentful of this project, even though I'm the one that decided to do it. And it wasn't enjoyable anymore. It was like a chore that I had to do. It became like this routine where it's like I go into the studio, I just start painting, and then I do like 4 works concurrently because I cycle through them. So it's like, okay, first layer watercolor, artwork 1, 2, 3, 4. Then second layer watercolor, artwork 1, 2, 3, 4. Third layer watercolor, artwork 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after that I go into the details for each one. And it was really starting to get to me, this whole sense of feeling like my life is just revolving around these illustrations. And that's not at all how I had envisioned myself to be living my dream of being an artist. So don't get me wrong, I know that, putting in hours in the studio is part of the process. And definitely if you want to create anything worthwhile, whether it's being an artist or researching something, or as a scientist experimenting, an inventor, whatever it is that is worthwhile for you as a pursuit, you have to put in the hours. Okay, so I'm not saying that I'm not complaining about the hours. I'm complaining about how it started to get very monotonous and repetitive, and I started to become very mechanical in the doing of things, and it was no longer something exciting or something that I looked forward to. It became like a chore that I had to get through somehow. So a couple of things happened this past week that allowed me to start shifting my perspective towards my illustration project and kind of get back on track again. Hopefully with the coming week we shall see. The first thing is my support group. So in that coaching and personal development community that I'm a part of, we have like smaller support groups. So in these support groups, it's really about how do we continue our growth and evolution in a conscious way. And how we do that is we take on different projects and we work together. We meet together with our group once a month to check in with everyone on their status and to overcome challenges that we face along the way. So I brought to them this challenge of how my illustration project right now is becoming a chore, and I'm really tired of it, and I just want to go and do something else. And this is not what I signed up for, but I still have 50 more days. Like, what am I gonna do? So from that session, talking to my project group mates about this issue and getting their perspectives, and them asking me questions which allow me to see a different perspective that I otherwise wouldn't see, because we all have our own blind spots, right? what I saw was that I was getting very fixated in my way of working as an artist. That, you know, my illustrations have to go through this very set process of like first layer watercolor, second layer watercolor, third layer watercolor. And it became something that I didn't even have to think about anymore, and therefore it was no longer challenging or exciting for me. And one of the things that I realized was that I got very fixated in that, and the initial plan, which was, you know, to do each one of them within 2 hours, was something that I had not actually explored. Like, is there a way to complete these illustrations within 2 hours? And, you know, that would actually allow me to come out of that fixation of, you know, I have to make the artworks in this particular way. Like, what if I set a timer for 2 hours and, you know, threw myself into one piece completely and just worked on it from beginning to end over that 2 hours? What would be the result? So that gave me a bit more excitement that, okay, you know, something different could actually come from this project for the next 50 days, or maybe the next 20 days, I don't know yet. But definitely it changes my way of perceiving my own project. So one of the things that I realized from that then is that our goals and the objectives that we have, we don't want to shift them too much, because they are, you know, we set those goals and outcomes because they are something that matters to us, and we have to see it through to completion. However, the process of going about doing those things can be different. Like, you know, my end point is still to complete these 100 illustrations. And the purpose of doing that is because I want to challenge my creativity and my creative process limits, my inspiration limits, my ideas limits, all of those things. So changing how I get there actually doesn't affect the outcome, because if I were to switch around and say, okay, I only have 2 hours for each artwork, and I'm no longer going to do them cyclically, but like, you know, one at a time, first one 2 hours, second one 2 hours, third one 2 hours, and so on, and complete each one within that 2 hours, then it's a different process, but it still leads to the same outcome. And so when I started to see that, I'm like, oh, you know, I don't have to stay fixated on one way of doing things. And then the second thing that happened was I realized also that I was getting very fixated in my routine, where, you know, I wake up, I do things a certain way, and then I go into the studio and work, and then I do other things, and I needed to break that as well. And so one of the things that I did today was I just went to a place that I had been meaning to go to in Singapore for many, maybe even years now. Like, I've heard of this place called the Punggol Waterway, and it's like on the far end of the island compared to where I live. Well, not that, well, it is kind of the far end of the island, but I don't live like at the edge. I live somewhere near the center, but it's still far anyway. So I've been putting off going there, and finally today I was just like, you know what, you need a break out of this routine. You need to go somewhere different and new, and just get the hell away from your life for a moment. So I went there today, and of course it was not the most ideal scenario today because it was kind of drizzling and it's a park, so I'm like outside, and I'm basically sitting on a bench while it's drizzling, and not, you know, sheltered or anything, and reflecting on my project, reflecting on how things are going with me as an artist, and what do I really want to work on, what do I really need to focus on, and all those things. And interestingly, it was actually kind of calming to do that, because I started to get some insights and ideas around how do I also navigate my path as an artist. Because like I said again, right, the outcome and the objectives don't change, but how I do it can actually be different. And by taking a break and going, you know, getting out of my routine, getting out of my life for a moment, I was able to explore other possibilities of, you know, different ways of how I can go about creating my own artist path and still achieving the goals and outcomes that I've set. So what I'm sharing today is that when we go about living our lives, a lot of times we get fixated in a certain way of doing things, in a certain ideas that we have about the goals that we think we're supposed to have. We get fixated on certain perspectives on how we think life is supposed to be. And it's good to take stock of that and to be aware of that, and to be aware when things start to get very routine and mechanical and mundane, when we're starting to feel very restless and we're starting to question what is the purpose of all this, why am I even doing all this, that is a great time to do something different. Change something up. Change something about your process of doing things, or go take a break from your life for a moment. I mean, that's why we go on vacation, right? Because it takes us out of our lives for a moment and we are free to become someone else and free to do other things. And then we come back into our lives again and we feel like totally renewed and excited and, raring to go forward. But really, we don't need to have a vacation to be able to do that. All we need is something different to break us out of that routine, to break us out of that fixation on whatever it is. And it can be anything, literally. It can be, just go to a restaurant you never went to before and order something different. Or even if it's your favorite restaurant, pick something different from the menu. Like, just do whatever it is to break yourself out of that rut and out of that sense of like, every day is kind of the same and like, what am I doing all this for? Take a break from all that so you can gain a different perspective. And if you have a group of like-minded friends that you can discuss things like this about, where you're not just talking about surface level stuff, and maybe there are also people who are a bit more introspective and more reflective about life and the meaning of life and all that, have a conversation with them too, because who knows, they might provide a different perspective on your situation and point out things that you actually haven't noticed before. So if you have enjoyed today's video, subscribe to my channel on YouTube, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, or you can also directly write to me through any of my links that you see in the write-ups attached to these videos. And I'll see you next week.